Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone.
Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to grow your family. We are your hosts, Kate and Emily, from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with our friend and colleague, Bruce, about his journey and his work in this space. Bruce, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you. Before we get into your own family story, we'd love for you to introduce yourself briefly for our listeners.
Sure. I'm an attorney in the Boston area. My practice is known as Modern Family Law, and I focus exclusively on helping people who are participating in third-party procreation. So gamete donation, surrogacy, all the participants in the process are people that I help. We do contracts, we do parentage, and other assorted stuff related to the process.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you're also an advocate in Massachusetts, and we'll definitely be talking about that in a little bit.
Yes.
But before we get into all of that, can you tell us a bit about your journey to starting a family? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, sure. It began, well, over nearly 2 decades ago, I have to say. My oldest is turning 18 this year. And when my husband and I decided we wanted to have children, we explored our options for how to build our family. And we pretty quickly landed on surrogacy as our preferred path to start moving forward. And we work with an agency to find a surrogate and an egg donor, and went through that process. We've been through the process twice with 2 different surrogates in different parts of the country. And for us, it was pretty successful. We had a couple of bumps along the way, but mostly a pretty seamless process for us. So we were fortunate in that regard.
That's great. And if this is too personal, you can tell me to pound rocks. But did you always know you wanted to be a parent? And at a younger age, did you see a path forward to parenthood for you?
That's a great question. For me, it was sort of an ebb and flow, that desire to be a parent. My husband comes from a large family, and he always wanted to be a parent, and as many kids as possible. We've got 2, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's great. And it is so wonderful that obviously IVF with donor egg and surrogacy existed at the time when you wanted to be parents.
Absolutely.
Because I think we forget sometimes that just within our lifetimes, that has made such huge advancements. Another close friend and partner of our organization is Dr. Samuel Pang. And, I often say, he's actually a pioneer. I mean, a lot of people use language like that to describe people, but he was a pioneer in fertility care for particularly gay male couples being able to pursue parenthood in this way. So we're fortunate in New England for sure.
We are. And for us, it was not super early in the process, but relatively early in the process when we did our first surrogacy. And it has changed so dramatically since.
You mentioned that each surrogacy experience that you had was in different states. I'm sure it was even different with a little time passing in between and the different states.
It absolutely was. There was 6 years between the 2, and very different experience in terms of the legal process in the 2 states that we worked with. And certainly from a personal perspective, it was very different because we'd already been through surrogacy, and we knew what to expect and how this would potentially unfold. But yeah, very different processes.
So was this your specialty before your own journey, or did your personal experience then impact your professional life? How did that relationship work?
Yeah. So people ask me how I got into this area of law, and I tell people it was by accident. That's my first answer. And the reason is before I became a lawyer, I worked in the business world. I was a business consultant for a large consulting company. And that was also the profession, or that is also the profession of my husband. And when we decided to have kids, one of the first things we had to grapple with was the fact that both of us traveled all the time, and we had to sort that out. So my career was such that it was very unlikely that I would ever work in the Boston area. I was traveling across the country, across the world, even for periods of time. So I decided to leave consulting with the idea of being a stay-at-home parent for the first year or so of our kid's life. And when I made that transition out of the business world, I started exploring my options of what will I do next as a career move. And I took some aptitude tests, and they came back. And for fans of aptitude tests, I apologize. I've never really been crazy about them. I kind of think they're a little silly, but I did it. And airline pilot was the first one that came back. And that was really funny because at the time I was really afraid of flying. So I said, that's absolutely not possible. And then the second choice on the list was lawyer. And I laughed at that too. I was like, that's just silly. I'm not going to go back to law school. And my husband looked at me and was like, you know what? You really should. You're kind of a lawyer. Like, what do you mean? Well, what he was saying is basically, I sit and read contracts. Like when we bought our house, I'm the one that read through all of the details. And when we started our surrogacy process, I sat with the contracts and went through them with a fine-tooth comb. And so I was like, maybe this is a possibility. And so I, took the LSAT, applied to law schools in the area, and ended up going to law school. When my oldest was 2 was when I started law school. And all during law school, I didn't have a concrete plan of what kind of law I was going to go into, but I graduated at a time when hiring wasn't great. We were kind of in the middle of a recession. And so I ended up going to work for a surrogacy agency and just stayed in this field. I started my solo practice in 2015, so 10 years ago now. And I did that in order to branch out to all forms of assisted procreation work. So I do gamete donation, embryo donation. I get involved in lots of different areas than just a narrow focus of a surrogacy agency. So that's how I ended up in this area. My personal journey kickstarted and informed my practice in this area, but it wasn't a linear line. Kind of just happened.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I'm so glad you shared that. I feel like you're such a lawyer. Like I can't picture you not wanting to dig into the details and dig into the language and everything. And I feel like you do need to have that because it's so much of getting into the details of the
Yeah.
language of things. So that's so funny. And obviously, I also think it's such a gift, I think, to your clients that you can appreciate what it's like to go through this yourself. Obviously, we know a lot of great people who are attorneys in this space who don't necessarily have that. But when you do, I think it is such an asset.
And hopefully my clients find it helpful. When I do have intended parents who are clients, if they are unsure about what the process looks like, I can tell them what I've seen from my own personal view as well as other clients' stories. And hopefully that is helpful.
Yeah. So, as a gay couple, you knew you were going to need a different path to parenthood. So, I think in that way, it's a different emotional journey than maybe infertility that's unexpected for whatever reason for an individual or a couple. But do you feel like you had an emotional journey as part of this? And if so, did you feel like those needs were met or addressed in any way?
Yeah, for sure. It's a different emotional process. I often describe it to people as the gay men who are doing surrogacy enter with a sense of optimism and hope and possibility. Whereas if you have a different sex couple who've struggled for 10 years trying to have a child, they may be coming from a place of skepticism and despair in some cases. So it's definitely a different emotional journey. For us, the process I like to think that we were easy intended parents to work with. We pretty much had to give up control of the process and trust the surrogates who helped us. And that's pretty much what we did. Yeah, there's times when it's really nerve-wracking. What's happening? What's going on? What's this medical appointment what's the result going to be? That kind of stuff. And then ultimately, oh no, we have a baby here. What do we do? That every new parent feels.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it worked well for us.
Yeah, that's great. And I think similarly, I feel like a lot of LGBTQ couples have led the way, I feel, in terms of disclosure and openness about their family's journey,
Um,
in part because for many, it wasn't a question of when you were going to tell people that you had to tell your own children that you took a different path to parenthood. But I'm still interested, again, if you're willing to share, like, how did you weave that into your family life? Talking about that.
I mean, it was obvious. So our oldest, when I think she was probably 3 or 4, she saw some of her friends' mothers pregnant and having other children, and she looked at me one day and was like, "Whose tummy did I come out of? It wasn't yours." So where'd I come from? And I
I
was like,
love it.
"Well, okay, this is a little earlier than I
This
expected
is
to have this
happening.
conversation."
Okay, we're ready. Yeah.
She's probably 4 or 5, not 3. But
Yeah,
like, okay, so let's talk about a couple of women who helped us.
that's
um,
great.
so yeah, a bit earlier than I expected.
Yeah. But I think the lessons of that are, I think, to me, then it's just woven into your family and
Yeah,
it's something positive and it's uh,
and no secrets. Yeah.
and no
Mhm.
secrets. Yeah.
Are you still in touch with both of those women? Are they, a part of your like extended community in any way?
So we had a closer relationship with one of them than the other, and we're connected like social media and stuff. It's been a while since we've communicated, because life happens. So, but we still consider both of them really a part of our extended family in some way.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge gift, obviously. And so bet they enjoy just even on social media, seeing your kids grow
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
of that.
yeah,
So we talked about your sort of a little bit about your day-to-day job in your private legal practice, but you also have taken on advocacy and teaching as also things, add-ons to your day-to-day
yeah.
legal practice. And so I think you're a great teacher and a great person. I mean, I haven't been one of your students, but I can tell you do a great job at synthesizing, information that can be very complex into a tangible piece that people can understand because you're teaching a lot of students who family formation law is not necessarily going to be their specialty, but
Right.
you want them to have an exposure to that. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more about your teaching, and then of course we're going to talk about advocacy.
Yeah, sure. So right now, this semester, I'm teaching family law at Northeastern University School of Law. Great school, yay, my alma mater. But they have me in periodically to teach family law, and it's really fun. I enjoy it, and I hope my students do too. I think family law broadly, not just assisted procreation, but or family formation. I think family law more broadly is so fascinating because whether we know it or not, it touches all of us, and it really is helps to shape our identities and our relationships to others in the world. And it's just a fascinating topic. So yeah, I really enjoy teaching, and I hope that the students get a lot out of it as well.
I'm sure they do.
So you were a very active member with us on the coalition to pass the Massachusetts Parentage Act. Would you describe yourself as a reluctant advocate at first?
No, I wouldn't. I was pretty active more in the beginning, frankly. Um, Back in 2015 is when I first went to, I think it was 2015 was when I went to my state rep and state senator to talk to them about putting together updates to our parentage law. And then at the end of 2015 is when Polly and I connected And we sat in her office and sort of planned out how are we going to put some legislation together, who are we going to include, that kind of stuff. And then we rapidly expanded the group from there. So I was kind of at the beginning sort of helping to push it off. And then, everything got crazy and it rolled downhill into a big snowball eventually.
And for those that don't know, it took over 8 years basically to get it passed. It was finally signed into law in 2024, which was very exciting.
It was.
And we are grateful to you for everything you did over that whole basically decade
Yeah.
of advocacy together. So, and can you talk a little bit about what parentage is for those that don't know and why it needed to be reformed in Massachusetts?
Yeah, sure. So parentage, when a newborn is born, we have to figure out who its parents are, who's going to take care of them, who's responsible for them. And the process of sorting that out is built up in our law here in America. We inherited the English system for doing that primarily. And what we do is we say the person who gave birth to the child is obviously a parent, because that's the way it's always been done traditionally. And then we look to see who a second parent would be. If the person who gave birth is married, then that spouse is the second parent. If that person is not married, then we need someone to step forward, or we want someone to step forward and assert their parentage. So that's sort of the way it's always worked. Why doesn't that work anymore? Well, because we have different ways of building families now than just a man and a woman conceiving a child on their own. We now have medical interventions, and we have gamete donation, and we have embryo donation, and we have surrogacy. So when these different types of interventions occur to bring a child into the world, we now have to work with a different model for how the child was conceived and born in order to determine who the parents are. And so our law in Massachusetts prior to January 1st of 2025 really was stuck in the old idea of the person who gives birth is the one parent and their spouse is the second parent, and we're going to wait for somebody else to come forward if there's another parent, if they're unmarried. And now we finally have a lot of clarity about the parental role, if any, that a gamete donor has, that a surrogate has, that people who start the process in motion to have the child, what role do they have as parents? So we now have a much more comprehensive approach to the way families are built today. And it was long overdue.
That's wonderful. So, can you talk a little bit to maybe the specifics of the MPA and what benefits Massachusetts families are going to start seeing this year?
Yeah. So, starting with the more complex end of the spectrum, surrogacy, where prior to the enactment of the MPA, the Massachusetts Parentage Act, in order to get the intended parents adjudicated as the legal parents of the child, and not the default position of the surrogate, because if she gives birth, she's presumed to be the parent, and we have to undo that presumption and get the intended parents on the child's birth certificate and viewed as the legal parents. Prior to the enactment, that was a process where we had to compile a big packet of papers to demonstrate to the court that the intended parents should be the legal parents of the child. And we would file that with the court prior to the birth of the child. And depending on the county and depending on the judge, we would be quickly successful, moderately quickly successful, or it could take a really long time, or in a case or two, it might have to be appealed because they're not doing things the way that they should do it. That uncertainty is now gone. The MPA, the Massachusetts Parentage Act, provides a really clear path to establishing parentage for the intended parents. And theoretically, it's supposed to be done quickly by the court. Um, I believe that they have 30 days to render their judgment. So hopefully with surrogacy, it will be a lot smoother and certain uh, path to parentage in those cases. Backing up from there, gamete donation now is a lot clearer, which is very, very important for the protection of many families in the Commonwealth. We now have it very clear that donors are not parents. Um, we now have it very clear that the people who work with the donor, a gamete donor, can establish their parentage without interference. And that's going to be very helpful, and particularly for same-sex female couples who work with a sperm donor to conceive a child. If they're married, prior to the enactment of the Massachusetts Parentage Act, if they were married, they had to go through a process to confirm their parentage and really solidify it. Um, now that they're now that the Massachusetts Parentage Act is in effect, we now have the voluntary acknowledgement of parentage that's available to married couples, where they can fill this out. It's got the effect of a court order, and they can establish their parentage on much more solid footing than they were able to before. So lots of great improvements. I could go on, but I think that that's you get the idea.
Good highlights. Those are really big changes. I mean,
Yeah.
for those who have gone through it, it's very streamlined and clarity is so important because this is already obviously a stressful situation. And so anything that can give you all as their attorneys and most importantly those parties involved clarity around what the process is going to look like. And you definitely did not have that prior to the MPA. So not to mention just streamlined process of getting to those legal protections that are so important for the well-being of the child and the safety and security of the family on the whole. So that brings me back to just one more question about your legal practice. I think a lot of people realize that there are contracts and things for the intended parents, but an important part of your job is really protecting all different parties that are
Yes.
involved. So can you share a little bit about that piece?
Yeah. I mean, I represent a lot of surrogates who are going through this process as surrogates. I want to make sure that they have all the protections that they need as well, in terms of the security of not being a parent and a whole host of other issues for the surrogate that we look at. Gamete donation is another one where I look very closely at how things are structured. If I'm representing a gamete donor, I definitely want the assurances that they're not going to be held to be a parent in a number of ways. And if it's particularly if it's a known donor, a known gamete donor who will expect to have an ongoing relationship with the parents, I want to really make it clear that after a child is born from the gamete donation, that we really have it sorted out carefully what that relationship looks like, what the relationship between the donor and the child is, and really making sure that there's not a parental relationship there, parental responsibilities on the donor, or any diminishment of parental responsibility and parental rights for the recipients of the donation. So there's lots of different interests that need to be balanced out between the adults in these arrangements, and that's what I focus on. The adults are making the arrangements. The eventual child, is not a part of these contracts. But of course, ultimately, they're the ones that live with the that are the result of these contracts. And so, in particular, when I'm involved in embryo donation cases, those are the more sensitive ones, in my mind, for the eventual child and existing children, because typically embryo donors already have completed their family and they have remaining embryos that they wish to donate. So they have children themselves who will be full genetic siblings to the children born to the recipients of the embryo donation. And so that becomes a process that we need to talk through and work out in the contracts what that looks like going forward.
So important. And it really is, as I've been saying, it's just so complex. I think it's incredible, but obviously it is not the common process. And just with more people involved, you have to have other layers of
Yep.
security, but also just the different roles are so important to clarify as much as possible and try to
Yep.
foresee the unforeseeable sometimes.
Exactly.
Well, so now that you have all this extra time on your hands because the MPA passed, haha, um, one of my advocacy quests is going to be that we still see all the time that even in states like Massachusetts that has infertility insurance coverage, there are exemptions that if ultimately you are using a gestational carrier, the IVF is not covered. And I feel like that is so discriminatory that I don't say that all, the non-medical aspects you could argue should or should not be covered, but at least the medical expenses to me should be covered regardless of ultimately who an embryo would be transferred into. So, will you join me in my advocacy to address that?
Yeah, I mean that it's a hard one. Sorry, I'm going to correct you. You could cut this out of the
Yeah.
podcast. I'm going to just you hit on one of my hot buttons. I'm going to rewind a little bit and say
Yeah.
you said those for people who are using a surrogate. I say working with a surrogate.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Yes. Oh my God, that sounds awful.
Yeah,
Using a surrogate.
I don't
Yes,
like
yes.
using
Thank
surrogates.
you.
I don't like using gamete donors.
No.
I always say working with
Yeah.
for individuals. You can use the process,
Right. I love it.
but we work with people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it.
Yes. Thank you.
Anyhow, back on track.
Actually, if you don't mind keeping your professor hat on for a minute, we talk with a lot of different lawyers in this space who all use different terminology to describe what kind of law they practice.
Yeah.
Assisted procreation, family formation, what is there one blanket term that's preferred, or is it just everybody kind of develops their own?
That's a tough question because technically we fall under family law because we're really dealing with parentage ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But under that, I think family formation is becoming a more widely used term. The the term assisted reproductive technology law is very established, and a lot of people use that. I personally don't like it. If I could, you know, wave a magic wand and change something, I would change that term simply because I don't like the word reproduction, because it's not always about reproducing, it's procreation. So I use the term assisted procreation wherever I can, as often as I can. But that's sort of my Don Quixote trying to move the mountain effort to change the terminology. But I like assisted procreation law or family formation. Family formation is understandable to most people, so that makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I heard you say that, and I liked that phrasing, and I do like family formation also. And I mean, I do think there is room for the phrases that each individual business feels most comfortable using. But at the end of the day, it is like you get
Yep.
categorized in different ways, like whether it's
Yes.
conferences or, national membership
Yep.
bodies call themselves
Yep.
different things, all those kind of things.
And I've also noticed like people will reach out and be like, I need a lawyer to help with this. Like they don't even know what to call it. So like you can't just do a Google search for I need X kind of
You
lawyer.
can't.
So it's interesting
You
to see
can't.
like
All the legal industry groups that are out there that help people find lawyers, they don't really know where to put us. We're a subcategory of family law, but
Right.
we don't really show up in searches. So it is a little tricky.
We're biased, but I think you're the best part of the law because a lot of family law, unfortunately, is a lot about separating and dividing and ending, or not ending families, but changing family dynamics. And we're at least at the start about forming them, which
Exactly. I
is
always
really
tell people that
nice.
I'm at the front end of family law, the happy part, where I put the families together before I refer them to my colleagues to take them apart.
Oh, yeah. So you, I mean, you wear a lot of hats. in your professional, life, your practice, your teaching, your advocacy work, is there one aspect that you find most rewarding?
Well, I have to find parts of each that are rewarding is really the answer. I mean, I like helping my clients with the variety of needs that they have. That to me is it's rewarding on a personal level, but it's also intellectually interesting and fascinating for me as well to see what kind of challenges people need help navigating. So that I find hugely rewarding, and that's my main my main job. So fortunately, I like it. The teaching is just very interesting for me from an academic and intellectual standpoint. I enjoy sharing with students these concepts and hearing from them what they think, because they're really the future of family law. I tell them that too. So that's very rewarding also. And the advocacy, sorry, Kate, I'm going to say that that's probably my least favorite thing just because it's so frustrating.
You don't need to apologize here. I always tell people it's like a marathon and not a sprint, and marathons are not that fun.
It really, I tell my children regularly that life would be a lot easier if people would listen to what I say and follow what I do, what I tell them to do, and that's what advocacy just frustrates me entirely about because I will say this is the right thing to do and they won't do it. So
Yeah. And my thing is, why wouldn't you want the experts in a given field informing the decisions that get made? Imagine that instead of
right,
having people that sometimes don't know anything about the topic are actually crafting the law that changes it.
yeah,
That
yeah,
is terrifying. And I always
is
am like,
agreed.
would you would you ask for the non-surgeon to do your surgery? No.
Nope.
So don't ask the non-expert to craft the law about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Well, I hear you, but I'm glad we got to advocate together and I'm glad we were successful for sure.
Yes,
So,
but happy to help you, Kate.
a couple questions before we wrap up. So, one, if anybody who's listening is like, "Oh, this is the kind of lawyer I'm looking for," whatever they decide to call it, what's the best way for folks to get in touch?
Go to my website. That's the easiest thing. It's modernfamily.law is the easiest way to get there. Modern Family, all one word, .law. There's a contact form on there. You can just, it sends me an email. It's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Great, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. So, with all of our guests, we like to ask them the two same questions to round off our episode.
Okay.
So, the first is, what is one thing that you would say to someone who's just starting to grow their family? And the second is kind of the flip side of that, is what's one thing that you wish people would stop saying when someone shares to them that they're trying to grow their family? You can answer them in whatever order you'd like.
Yeah. So when people come to me at the start of a process, usually they're coming to me a few steps past the start of a process. But my answer is kind of the same for that, which is I want them to think forward and think about different paths that may or may not open up for them that they may have to choose between. So, for example, when I'm fortunate enough to have clients come to me very early in the process, they're just starting to work with a fertility clinic and they want to have me look at the consent forms. I want to start talking with them about what happens if this doesn't unfold the way you expect it to. Have you thought about potentially needing gamete donation as a solution or even surrogacy? And what will that look like? What are these forks in the road that you might encounter? Hopefully you don't, but you might encounter some different choices along the way. And I want people to start thinking about that and projecting forward. A real concrete example of conversations that I have regularly are with intended parents are, so if you're going to have a child, we want to secure your parentage to that child. And what does that look like? And what is the risk to your family for that parentage not being recognized? And that will include conversations about what is your citizenship status? Do you have citizenship in another country? And if you do, is that country going to recognize your parentage of this child. So we have conversations like that. And the short answer to this, the short version of this long answer, is that I want people to think about different eventualities uh, along the way.
That's great. I mean, and it just shows that the parentage implications can be a lot more widespread than what people might think.
They absolutely can be.
I also think it's good to consider them and think about them before you're in the moment of them, because sometimes when there's that fork in the road, you've been through some things. I mean, that's part of why we changed our organizational name to All Paths, is there's all these different potential paths. And sometimes it's exactly at that moment where you're considering switching to another one that you've already been through trauma or loss or sadness, all the different emotions. So I think it's great to even begin thinking about them before you're at them. And you may
Absolutely.
never need it, but those conversations are so important to do calmly
Exactly.
at the as close to the beginning as you can.
Exactly. And that's when people are more
Mhm.
clear-headed and can at least, if they haven't thought through everything, which they won't, because you can't really think through these things unless you've been through them. But at least they're prepared better to address it if it does come up. So yeah. And the other question, when people are struggling to build their family, lots of things can be said to them. Yes. And I guess I would classify comments in a couple of different ways. There are a lot of comments that will be said to people from a place of support and well-meaning. And some of those might be inappropriate, honestly, and they might do some damage. But if it's coming from a place of support and good intentions, I tend to take that at face value and move forward from there, or encourage people to accept it for what it meant. The more problematic things that get said that I think are highly inappropriate are coming from a place of judgment, either judgment about the path being taken or judgment about the people who are looking to become parents. And these can be backhanded comments or not directly said that way, but someone could say something like, "Oh, you're pursuing surrogacy. Why don't you just adopt instead? There's lots of children waiting for our home. Why are you going through all of this to create a new person?" That can be very judgmental about the process that the people are choosing. I believe that we have a fundamental right to procreate in this country. That is still the case from the Supreme Court. We don't have it really clearly articulated in our law that we have a fundamental right to procreate in any way that we want through medical assistance. But I believe that we really should have that. And I don't want judgment placed on the process, the method of bringing a child into the world, because ultimately that's harmful to the child. It's not just judgment on the parents, but it's saying to a person that the way that you were conceived and brought into this world is wrong. And I think that that's very problematic on a lot of levels. So, judgment based comments about the way you're bringing a child into the world and whether or not you're actually fit to be parents is, problematic to me.
Agreed. Unfortunately, there can be a lot of that. Those, why don't you just insert supposedly helpful comment there? But like,
Yeah.
what do you think the people going through this
Yeah.
haven't already thought about all of those different options?
Exactly. Or why would you want to be parents anyway? Just enjoy life and travel.
Oh,
I know. Or like, I love the ones who are like, you're literally telling them, I've been struggling with infertility and loss for years. And they're like, take my kid. I'm
yeah,
sick of him. And you're like,
that's
really? Like,
Yeah,
that's
no.
so not
okay.
helpful.
Our worst experience was in the hospital the first time through when a nurse actually questioned our surrogate whether or not it was appropriate uh, to give the child to us.
Are you serious?
Wow.
That's,
Yeah,
mm, I'm sorry.
that's right. We moved through it.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Bruce. It was lovely to chat with you, and I'm sure everybody listening along has gotten a lot out of what you had to to say. And thank you kind of on behalf of all of us in Massachusetts for the work that you did with the Mass Parentage Act.
You're very welcome, and couldn't have done it without all paths.
We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at allpathsfb, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to thank our rainbow sponsor, Granada Bio. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.